All right, let's get started. Well, thank you everyone for coming to our fourth and final winter lecture series. I'm so happy that you're all able to be here. For the folks who've stuck it out for all four, we appreciate you. And for folks who are just popping on for the first time, you picked a good presentation to start on. So my name's Corey. I'm the horticulturist at McLaughlin Garden, and I'm also the organizer for the winter lecture series. Um, And today we have a presentation that is very near and dear to both Jim and myself. We're going to be talking about building better buffers using native plants as a method of shoreline erosion mitigation. Before I get into that real quick, just want to say a big thank you to all the people who made this happen. That includes our volunteers who put their time and energy into helping out here, as well as their baking skills, as we have this lovely selection of snacks to choose from here. I'd also like to thank the folks who have helped to promote the Winter Lecture Series, including folks over at Advertiser Democrat, and as well as for this presentation specifically, Ellie Hadigan at the main DEP. Okay. And if you want to see more programming like this later in the season, feel free to make a donation to the garden. Even just $5 helps. You can do so in person or online on our website at mclaughlingarden.org. All right, so let's get started. Just with a quick introduction. Like I said, my name is Corey. I'm the horticulturist at McLaughlin Garden, and on any given day, you can find me out in the garden, weeding or planting, leading tours, and working on horticultural related programming. Anyone who has talked to me for more than 2 seconds probably knows I have a strong affinity for native plants and utilizing them in wildland restoration projects. So it only makes sense that when Jim approached me about a year and a half ago with the prospect of bringing native plants and resiliency programming to Thompson Lake Environmental and Thompson Lake, the collaboration just made sense. So I'll let Jim introduce himself.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Corey. This is a great collaboration that we started, as Corey said, about a year and a half ago. One of the things that first of all, I'm a board member at Thompson Lake Environmental Association. I direct the Youth Conservation Corps. And Thompson Lake, if any of you, especially those who are on Zoom and not from the area here, might not know Thompson Lake. It's about a 4,200 acre lake bounded by Oxford, Otisfield, Casco, and Poland. And we've been in existence for 52 some odd years. And a few years back, we began to shift our impetus and our expertise and support for the lake from removing milfoil from the lake. And in the last 10, 15 years, we've removed over 550 some odd tons of milfoil from our lake. So we're now in the maintenance stage. So after the maintenance stage, we had room to be able to address other areas of concern. And that area is called NPS, or non-point source pollution, which is the runoff of water into the lake, which pollutes the lake. So about 4 years ago, I was on a committee that brought in education from Maine Lakes in Yarmouth to help us prepare educational modules for shoreline landowners. And we had approximately 8 or 9 people trained to be evaluators by Maine Lakes and in the Lake Smart program. And we went out and evaluated properties for a potential and actual erosion events that were going on, and made several page reports with pictures that showed applications that could minimize and change the flow of the water to the sides of the properties and not down into the lake where it damages the water quality. And then the next year, I took over the planning and execution of the Youth Conservation Corps, which we had about a 3 year. It was 2 years in COVID and the year before that we couldn't hire anybody, high school kids and a director to do that. And so I began doing research and then found in Oxford, there's a part of the school system is called Oxford Hills Technical School. And I found a teacher there who was interested in working with us in the summer. And he brought along several students that he knew that wanted to work outdoors. And we started, reconstituted our YCC Youth Conservation Corps program. And so one of the things that finally happened after about 2 years is that we realized there were some gaps in what we could do, what we knew how to do, and how to instruct people and advise them. And one of the major gaps was that there was no real understanding in our organization about the particularities of plants, where they needed to go, and what types of different plants could be used and how to access them and who to plant them. So we made a natural collaboration coming over here and meeting Corey, and we introduced our program, Build Better Buffers. So there we are on my aspect of this, and Corey can take it from there.
Okay, so today in this presentation, some of the main points we're going to cover. What are buffers, essentially? Why do we need them? What are the issues associated with erosion and sedimentation? And then how are we addressing it with our Build Better Buffers program? And how can you address it on your own properties, whether that is lakeside, streamside, or even if you're not even on a body of water, erosion still happens. So there are pieces that every one of us can kind of take away from this. Let's see. Okay. So does anyone want to hazard a guess what I'm talking about when I'm saying buffer in relation to shorelines? You can also type in the chat if you are attending online. Okay, so when we're talking about buffers, riparian buffers or shoreline buffers, we are talking about a zone of vegetation that goes along the edge of a body of water, whether that's a stream, river, lake, ocean, etc. So that it's a zone of vegetation, and this zone is kind of the first defense the body of water has against erosion and sedimentation going into the water. And the best buffer you could possibly have is a forest, because it is a complex of different living and non-living components that are able to sequester water running off. They're able to act as a physical barrier. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So you have, in a forest, you have trees, shrubs, herbaceous perennials, and all of these can serve as a physical barrier against erosion. Let's take, for example, during a storm event, we have all this rain coming down, and often in a short period of time. That rain, once it hits the ground, starts to coalesce as it goes downhill. And as it coalesces, it picks up speed and it kind of cuts through the soil. And that picks up sediment, it picks up nutrients from the soil, and eventually all of that gets deposited into the body of water, whether that's a stream or lake, etc. But if you have plants to serve as a physical barrier, that actually slows these streams down. So as the streams are coming down an area of high elevation, having trees and shrubs with woody trunks, they serve as a great stopgap to slow down the velocity of these streams and prevent it from dredging up so much of the soil. So another way that plants are excellent in preventing erosion is that we know plants have roots that they use to stabilize themselves, but those roots also stabilize the soil. So as those roots stretch out, they are kind of holding that soil in place. So if you have a buffer zone, let's say you have an embankment that has shrubbery growing out of it is going to be much more stable than a bare embankment. So those shrubs actually act as kind of a retaining wall against erosion. So they use their roots as well as their trunks to prevent erosion. And then finally, plant roots uptake excess soil moisture. So if you have areas of standing water, plants will work to sequester and dissipate that water. Any excess nutrients that are in that water will also get uptaken and sequestered. So that can remove those nutrients before they end up in the body of water, which we'll talk about in a minute why that's not a great thing. But of course, post-colonization, a lot of these forests have been harvested and converted into agriculture, homes, and public infrastructure, removing those buffers. So as land stewards, it is our responsibility to revegetate those buffers.
So what are we looking at trying to get evaluated and rid of? And that is the erosive action. So what we see here is a good example on the left of water running down past the house, under the house, through the house, and down and digging these giant gorging gullies down from the sand. This is all a sand beach. And I know this looks like it's got snow on it, but this is dry sand, and then this is the soil underneath some of the sand, but giving you an idea of the depth of the gullies there. Here's another example here. So you can see a lot of tree roots here. This is a pathway to the water. There's a dock down here, and all of this running water takes soil into the shrubbery that's on the side, but it also takes it down and drops it in underneath where the dock is and into the water. Here's just an unbelievable amount of erosion that goes down a hill. It's not medium steep, but and the velocity of the water and the quantity of the water really is stripping this surface soil off the roots and the trees of the roots of the trees and putting it directly into the water. So this is erosion. This is an example of what we're looking for in various areas, and then later we will discuss how to prevent that from happening in the future.
And so in addition to just the removal of soil and removal of material from the land, a pretty significant issue associated with erosion and sedimentation is the occurrence of algal blooms. Who here likes algae? No? Okay, that's fair. Algal blooms or algae and cyanobacteria are a natural part of a lake ecosystem, or streams, rivers, etc. They're naturally occurring. The issue arises when excess nutrients are dumped into this body of water, and that, in addition to rising temperatures over time, means that algal blooms are much more prevalent because the warm temperature and the nutrients, especially phosphorus, fuel algal breakouts. And when you get to an outbreak status, you start to have some serious issues, both with the health of the lake and with human health as well. Many forms of algae can actually be toxic to humans. It's why we tend to avoid recreating in lakes and bodies of water that have an outbreak of algae. So just for the human aspect of it, it definitely puts a damper on things, but it is also can be detrimental to the wildlife, the aquatic life that are in that body of water. So what happens is the phosphorus ends up in the body of water that fuels the growth of algae. And at a certain point, they can become so dense that it blocks sunlight out from reaching the bottom of body of water. And so that means that the plants, the aquatic plants in there, are not photosynthesizing as much as they could be, which means there's not as much oxygen being put out. And then at the end of the season, those algae die, sink to the bottom, and then are consumed by detritus eating organisms. And that releases more oxygen and it releases more nutrients into the body of water. And then that's where we start having this positive feedback loop effect, where if remediation steps aren't taken, algae can get out of hand very quickly and disrupt the entire food web, essentially. And you can get essentially these what are called dead zones where there is just no oxygen in the system. And this can have a cascading effect not only on the specific body of water, but on the watershed as a whole.
So how do we start to identify what we can do with the erosion effects that we see? One of the major helps that we got was from LakeSmart, which you can see a very nice picture of the quality of water and vegetation and the birds and whatnot. And LakeSmart has a lot of education. They show various kinds of ways to remediate of the erosion effects. One of the things that they also do is help us to look at places like this, where there's a culvert there that's being filled up with sand and debris. And at this point, this is an identified area, and so some plan to do something with that. That's what our LakeSmart program does, is identify these areas and how we might be able to mitigate those. So if you're interested in looking at some of the videos and some of the schematic diagrams that they have for some of these processes of erosion control mitigation, go to lakes.maine. That's the full one would be HTTP with the www.lakes.maine and look through their catalog of various LakeSmart discussions. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm next. We're not alternating. So as I've been doing the YCC program, Youth Conservation Program, we started off with something called using what's called best management practices, BMPs. Now, there's a lot of BMPs there. You can see house runoff from drip lines, rubber razor bars, box culverts, diverters, and collection basins and other areas. Terrace levels is one of the most important things that people can start to build. Just think about the Incas and how they made these stone terrace areas with soil in them to keep them soil on the mountains and then grow crops. These are examples here. This is what's called a box culvert. And running across a road going in this direction, it's tilted and it puts water into another BMP, which is the area where there's vegetation, so it can be soaked up. This is a razor bar. This is a rubber razor bar. It's cut from in conveyor belts and put in with pieces of wood around it, and it's got stone around it, so that the water that's going down this hill, you can see here another rubber razor bar here. The water is coming down off of the main road. I think this is Cobb Hill Road. Coming down here, we put 5 of these on a 300-foot road. And it then diverts it into the tree area. Otherwise, the water goes down there and makes huge gullies. Here is something that's called a diversion step. This is a 6x6 piece of wood that's put at an angle. And then we do an area where we dig down a foot, 2 foot, put stone in here so that when the water comes down this pathway down towards this area, it stops it. It tends to divert it into this other area and it lets it soak it in. And here is erosion control mix. So we have a curved pathway to the water, to the dock area. And then there's an introduction of the beginning introduction of various plants, which will, as the years go by, they'll get bigger, but then you can introduce plants in the other areas and then have more shrubbing going on here. And the walkway here is where soil is no longer compacted as much as it would be if it was all grass and people walking on it all the time. So this is a bit more percolating for the water. This is one area that this is a large open area 15 or 20 years ago that the landowners built catchment basins and then started putting lots of shrubs in them. So that the water that comes from the house, which is over here and was running down to the lake, it's interrupted. And there's like little islands here. And then there's another layer of shrubs here. And then there was right in down in the front area here, there's even more shrubs. So this last year, we put more plants in that area there. So this is something that can happen over 5, 10, 15 years. This area here is a small introduction of plants at a wall so that the water then would be interrupted here, perhaps soaked in as much instead of just falling over the wall and going in there. And I think Corey will talk to you a little bit about this stream here.
Yeah, so here we're talking about the new best management practices, even though, pre-colonization, vegetated buffers were the natural best management practice. But we're relearning that plants, for some of the reasons that we've talked about already, make excellent buffers. So on the far right picture, you can see there, so that is what a natural buffer to a creek would look like. You have moss and ferns. It's a little bit hard to see in person, but you have moss and ferns leading all the way up into the embankment and then around. And what those do is they stabilize the soil. And then in the instance of a storm event, those are going to adhere the soil and ensure that minimal sedimentation occurs into that brook or stream. And so when we're talking about new best management practices, and these are kind of practices that are being gradually adopted by the DEP as the kind of standard, we're not saying go and tear out your riprap or remove your razor bars. The great thing about plants is that they can be incorporated into your existing best management practices. So if you do have riprap, so rocks along your embankment to kind of hold the soil in, you can plant into those. There are plants that thrive in between the crevices of rocks. And so you get this entourage effect of the rocks stabilizing the soil, but also the roots of the plant stabilizing the soil. So your old best management practices and the new best management practices can work together synergistically. And not to mention that when you're using native plants, not only are they going to be providing erosion benefits, but they're going to be providing a whole host of ecological benefits, including attracting pollinators, providing forage for wildlife, providing protection and habitat for wildlife, and just encouraging species diversity in general. And so ideally, in an ideal world, a buffer extends about 75 feet from the shoreline, but realistically, not everybody has space or the ability to plant 75 feet worth of trees. Some people who live on the lake, their house is 30 feet from the lake. So but that is to say, any buffer is better than no buffer at all. Whether that's the line of daylilies in the middle picture here, or your kind of well planned out long-term garden beds designed to stop the flow of erosion. Anything is better than nothing. Anything is better than just a line of turf grass that is going to do very little as far as uptaking water and nutrients and as far as stopping flows of water during storm events. So any buffer is better than no buffer.
So here's where we got together. Corey came over to my property and we started a pilot program. And that's me on the left, giving the money to Corey to do this process. And he then looked at my waterfront area and where there was gaps, where there was no plants, and where there was areas that trees and bushes were starting to grow. But and he identified various kinds of plants that would be helpful. That's Corey in the middle and our Thompson Lake Environmental Association's president, Ron Armitrout, who also directs our Lake Smart program. So this is the beginning of our program, and I think you'll see that that it goes from there. And I'll let Corey tell you about how he evaluated our property.
Yes. So kind of the approach with Build Better Buffers is to promote lake health on Thompson Lake through homeowner consulting, through native plants, and through educational outreach. But specifically here, I'm just going to talk to you about what the actual homeowner outreach aspect looks like. It takes the form of a consultation where Jim and I will go to a person's property. They will have already had a Lake Smart review. So there are, all of their erosion issues have been identified already, which helps us quite a bit. So the first thing we're looking at is what are the erosion issues on that property, and then how can we address them with native plants? So we show up to the property and we consult with the homeowner. We talk about what their planting objectives are, both from an erosion perspective as well as from a design perspective, because of course people want plants in the ground. They probably have some preferences about what kind of plants they want to use. So we take their preferences into account, as well as what actually needs to happen as far as preventing erosion, whether that's adding a rain garden to sequester a soggy area, or putting up a shrub to stop a consistent stream that is carrying sediment into the lake. That's kind of the first priority on our list. As far as the plants go, we consider, of course, sun exposure. I'll do a soil test to make sure we're as informed as possible when we're suggesting plants. So we do soil test, and we take into consideration the topography of the land as well, because if you have a steep south-facing hill, you're not going to want to be utilizing wildflowers or woodland plants. There's going to be prairie plants that are able to deal with a little bit of moisture, just for example. And then we create a planting plan that the homeowner can use, which looks a little something like this. So just the breakdown is a little bit hard to see in person, but in the first column, we have the plants suggested. Next to that, we have the light requirements of the plant, and then the size of the plant, because not everyone is going to want a 10-foot tall shrub blocking their lake view. So make sure that they're aware of the potential size. And then on the far right there, you'll see the seasons of interest. So this is kind of the design aspect. An important concept in gardening is multiple seasons of interest. So you want something that is blooming or has nice foliage year round. And you create that with multiple different plants to create an effect. So you can see on the bottom left, that's kind of a, I don't expect you to be able to read that, but kind of a blown up view. And you can see this is what like a full planting plan looks like. So you can see that there's something blooming or producing berries most of the growing season. And that's kind of capturing that multiple seasons of interest. And the great thing about these planting plans is that you don't have to do everything all at once. You don't have to go out and buy 20 plants and put them in the ground all in one season. You can take a staggered approach to it. Every year, you can add a handful of plants and just sit back and see. It's kind of the spirit of experimentation because I have these suggested seasons of interest, but just because that is the average time that this plant blooms, that doesn't mean exactly when it's going to bloom. And it might do something different in your garden. So kind of waiting and seeing is a really great approach to gardening because you can kind of adjust as you go, fill in the gaps in your season of interest. Yeah.
So after the plot plan is made and the choices are made, who can plant? So as you can see here, there's a picture of our crew, our YCC crew. We've got their teacher in the center on the right side, and we've got three of the students there on the surround, and they're in front of a box culvert that they have just installed. So they are capable of doing some of the BMPs and the planting. The next level of planters could be the DEP certified contractor who has the legal right to be able to work on the waterfront. And then the other important area is the homeowner can work with their own plants. They can do their own planting with a little bit of help from me. I'm certified with the state of Maine for erosion control efforts, and I can give about an hour of tutelage to them so that they can then go ahead and do what they need to do, which might be planting appropriately, but also surrounding the base of the plant with some erosion control mulch so that the disturbed dirt when you plant doesn't, with the first rain, rush into the lake. So some permitting may be necessary, and that needs to be taken into consideration, whether there's DEP permitting or whether there's town permitting, and with each of the ways that we do it is needed to look at that. So where we're going now. Here we are. We're here for Corey in his planting.
Okay, so up to this point, we've talked about erosion, and we've talked about kind of bolstering your buffers and our program specifically. But what kind of plants should you use? This is by no means going to be a comprehensive list of every plant that you could plant as a buffer plant. That would be an insanely long list, but it's kind of a little crash course in some of the plants that will probably work best for most properties, soil notwithstanding. So these are some of the plants that I end up suggesting on our consultations most frequently on Thompson Lake. So we have sheep laurel, Palmia angustifolia. This plant is probably my number one recommended plant because it is entirely bomb proof. These are plants that are suitable for dry soils, the ones I'm talking about now, but this one can also survive completely submerged for a short amount of time. You'll often find it in bogs as well as on like rocky outcroppings. So this is a really incredible plant. It's very pretty as well. It's a member of the heath family, so related to rhododendrons. Really excellent plant, and it's a short, kind of grows maybe 2 feet tall tops. So it's a very nice, neat form. Only caveat is it is poisonous. So if you have a dog or a small child that may try to eat the plant, not a good suggestion. But luckily we have plenty of other choices to choose from. So bearberry, Arctostaphylos uva ursi. This is an incredible plant. for really dry, rocky areas. It doesn't really need much soil at all to grow. You'll often find it growing on tops of mountains or hills that in just rocky granite pockets. So really like sand, and it's Ericaceae, so related to blueberry. It has kind of blueberry-like foliage, and it rambles along the ground. So this is an excellent plant to use in combination with a larger plant. So you kind of create a mosaic of roots. You have a large shrub that has wide spreading roots, and then you plant this on top, which adheres the surface of the soil. So again, you can plant kind of collaboratively to get the best erosion mitigation effect. Same goes for blueberry. This is yeah, pretty ubiquitous plant in Maine, and it also works really well for kind of a synergistic planting along with a larger shrub or herbaceous perennial. We have sweet fern, Comptonia peregrina. Not actually a fern. It's in the myrtle family. But that's okay because it is another excellent plant. It is aromatic. It grows about 3 feet tall tops, so it's relatively neat. It grows in really, really dry soil. So a lot of lakeside properties have really acidic, sandy, and for some parts of the season, really dry soil. And this is an excellent choice. If you have an embankment, I was talking about shrubbery growing over embankments to adhere to soil. This is an excellent choice for that because it's got a really great root system that just kind of holds the soil in place. If anyone has any questions during this, feel free to ask. We will be recording this, so if you miss anything, you can certainly hop back on. We'll post this on our YouTube page, and you can review it. But it's kind of doing lightning round right now. Northern bush honeysuckle, Diarvilla lonicera. While not a true lonicera, it is a highly, highly drought tolerant plant and can tolerate full sun down to part shade. And it is another one that is a relatively neat size, topping out at about 4 feet. And it is just such a great plant. It has really pretty flowers, these kind of orange, yellow, tubular, honeysuckle-like flowers. And another one that is really hard to kill once you get it established. Eastern hay-scented fern. We're continuing the trend of really drought tolerant plants here because if you've ever spent any kind of time in really sandy soil or a sand pit, you'll probably see these growing. They can also tolerate up to a few hours of direct sunlight a day, which is unusual for a fern, but they are incredibly hardy, and when they're in their right environment, they can colonize kind of prolifically, which in a lot of cases is what we're looking for in an erosion control plant. Something that can put down seed, that can send out suckers or send out rhizomes and kind of colonize a piece of land in a short amount of time. This isn't exactly formal gardening we're doing here, although it can be if you've got a lot of time on your hands to weed. Big blue stem, Andropogon gerardii. This is a great plant if you have some space to work with because it can get quite tall, up to 7 feet tall, actually. So maybe not one you want to plant right in front of your lake view, but another really great drought tolerant plant that puts off really cool color at the end of the season. It kind of turns this bluish purple color. So let's get excited about grasses again. Grasses are so underappreciated. Good grasses, not turf grasses. All right, plants for wetter areas. I'm gonna contradict myself very quickly here, but most of these plants are considered wet tolerant. I picked this picture I picked of a bog. It's probably the most extreme example of a wet area. But a lot of the plants we're going to be talking about that you don't need full year-round submersion. Well, some of them you do. We'll kick it off with the Pennsylvania sedge, Herix pennsylvanica. Another really underappreciated plant that works well as a lawn alternative. While it can't necessarily tolerate the same foot traffic that your turf grass does, it will, spread pretty prolifically and maintain a relatively short height. So if you have an area of lawn that you don't feel like you use super often, this might be a good choice. One of my cohorts likes to say, your lawn should be like uh, a carpet rather than or excuse me, rather a area rug rather than a carpet. So use lawn where you think you'll need it, and the rest of it utilize it for another plant species. Because if you're not going to be stepping on it, it could be used by wildlife or pollinators. So just a thought. This could be that plant. Willows are kind of the superstar of erosion control and moisture uptake. They really thrive in standing water and really moist soils, and they have the ability to uptake a lot of water. So if you have an extremely moist spot on your property, if you've got lawn that squelches when you step on it, this might be a great plant to implement. I've got two examples here, Salix nigra, which is black willow. That is one of Maine's kind of only tree form willows. And then the more characteristic pussy willows, which is Salix discolor, which is a much shorter kind of shrubby plant. Both of them thrive in really wet environments and are kind of perfect if you have a spot that it just never really dries out. And they're also extremely attractive with their, long cascading foliage and their pussy toes. Buttonbush, Cephalanthus occidentalis. This one thrives in standing water. So you'll see this growing on lakeside embankments and growing out into the water a lot of the time. So another one for if you have a spot of standing water, this is a great choice. And it has really cool flowers. Who doesn't like those button bush flowers? So another excellent choice. Gray dogwood. So as with the previous two, this is a slightly larger shrub, maybe 10 feet tall at max height, but with less sunlight will be a little bit shorter. But this is another one that is great for super, super wet areas. But it can also tolerate a little bit of drying out. So if you've got a wet spot that does dry out halfway through the season, something that would probably not be great for the button bush, the gray dogwood would thrive in that spot. And it also is kind of a prolific suckerer, so it puts out additional stems from its base and kind of very quickly forms a nice round shape. And in addition, it has these beautiful white flowers in the early season, which turn into these cool kind of doll eyes-esque berries later in the season. Uh, Swamp vervain, Verbena hastata. This is an herbaceous perennial, so it dies back every season, but it is perfect complementary planting for your wet areas. And it's a really great pollinator magnet, and it can rebloom if you deadhead it. So this is a great kind of more traditional garden plant. So if you have some formal gardens or you have a pollinator garden where a large gray dogwood would not work, this could be an excellent choice. Joe Pye weed, everyone knows Joe Pye weed. This is Eutrochium maculatum. This one specifically supposedly grows in wet areas, but this is where I was saying I was going to contradict myself because it is also extremely drought tolerant once established. So at the garden, we have it growing out in full sun in a dry, sandy soil, and it just gets cooked by the sun all day long. With very little water whatsoever. So even though it thrives in wet environments, this is a great kind of all-around plant. It's an excellent generalist and also a pollinator magnet. New York ironweed, Vernonia noveboracensis, say that 5 times fast. Very similar niche to Joe Pye weed in that it's supposedly a very wet tolerant plant, and it is, but it is also extremely drought tolerant. So great all around plant. And if you don't mind a 7 to 10 foot tall herbaceous perennial in your yard, this is a great choice. It also does its best when it's planted heavily with other herbaceous perennials in a kind of prairie setting, because in prairies and in meadows, plants naturally are growing all together. They're growing up through one another, and that kind of trellises them. So that is to say, if you plant this all by itself, it will flop. So if you're going to plant it, maybe consider a small prairie garden where you plant rudbeckia and echinacea and other prairie plants that'll support it. Gray sedge, another severely underrated plant. This one grows very frequently along stream beds. It's a really cool kind of clumping perennial, and it has these spikelets for seed pods that you see on the right there. So kind of adds unique interest throughout the season. And that then at the end of the season, when they dehiss and the seed pods pop off, ideally this is growing near a stream or a body of water, and then those seed pods will actually float and carry the seeds to a next location. So you can actually get an area colonized with these pretty quickly. So it is an excellent choice if you don't have a whole lot of time and you want some grassy-ish plants on your property. All right. Cardinal flower and great blue lobelia, two excellent plants for wet areas. What is not to like about a bright red flower like cardinal flower? Cardinals, or excuse me, hummingbirds love it. Butterflies love it. Pollinator magnet. Same goes for great blue lobelia. Great blue lobelia is a little more drought tolerant, can grow in a more wide variety of soil types, and it grows a little bit more aggressively. So not great for a formal gardening situation, but if you want to naturalize an area, blue lobelia. If you have more formal gardens or a formal rain garden, your lobelia is going to be, a great choice. We're rounding down here almost at the end. Rosy meadowsweet and steeplebush, they both grow in very similar environments. They're both Spirea alba, and tomentosa. They can be fairly drought tolerant once established. So you're kind of seeing a theme here, right? Just because they love water doesn't mean they always need it. But these are great kind of tall plants. They can reach like 5 feet or so. Another one that you're going to want to plant with other plants, otherwise it will kind of flop. But a great one to have kind of peeking out from your garden. Sea oats, Chesmanthium latifolium. So you can see I really love grasses, and I'm hoping we can get folks to appreciate them too. This one has these seed pods year round, and so it creates this really cool kind of effect. You've got this very flat lace-like foliage, and then these seed pods that are present throughout the season, just kind of hanging above. So you can create some really cool kind of garden designs with this plant. It does like to naturalize when it's in its ideal environment. So another one that you don't want necessarily for a formal garden, but if you have a patch of land that's a little bit moist, kind of in the shade, the sun, or shade to kind of part shade, this is going to be a good choice for you.
How tall does it get?
Yeah, the question was how tall does this one get? And it's not huge. It'll get about 3 feet at maturity. So it's kind of a low-lying grass. It's not like your blue stem, which is gonna get upwards of 7 feet tall. So this one, it's well behaved in that respect. All right. We'll have
Okay.
Jim talk about our resources.
Well, what a wonderful explanation and description and pictures that Corey gave us. We have a resources page here. I want to thank some of the people that have been involved with this project. Andrea Stevens at Maine Lakes. She and I originally started this conversation and then worked over towards the DEP with Addie Halligan. Soil and water conservation districts on our lake are important. Oxford and Androscoggin Soil and Water Conservation District. Androscoggin is working on our 319 federal grant for us right now, which is our third federal grant in the 30 years of applying for those. Lake Environmental Association has been very helpful for us and providing lots of information and is a really, really good resource. An amazing resource is the Maine DEP certified erosion control contractors list, which is within the DEP non-point source training center and our subsequent Our Shore agenda, which is emerging at the present moment. And then there's, of course, TLEA, myself, and Corey below that. I'd like to also thank the Maine Climate Corps Network, which is part of Volunteer Maine, which we joined. TLA joined that. They helped us with some grant facility monies. And also Corey and I and a number of the people I've already mentioned are our emerging group, which is doing this BBB, this Build Better Buffers, and spreading it statewide, hopefully. What we have here is other people getting involved. Brenda Zolicich at the Muskie School of Social Service, I believe it is. And of course, I mentioned Addie Halligan at the Maine DEP. What I want to say as a final point is that we are in an area in a time when there is employment opportunity for people who are planters who want to work on the waterfront. And they need to get a certification so they can actually do that. And there's also a time now for contractors who have put down all this rock and road work and whatnot to keep erosion out of the lake to learn about plants, native plants. And we wish that all of you folks in the watershed areas where you're working, if you can help develop an increased network so that locally we can have plants available and people who know how to plant available and people who are certified available. And that way we don't have to drive 100, 200 miles to get plants. And so that's what our BBB statewide is going to be working on in consideration with our shores in the state level. And hopefully we'll be able to train people in such a way that they can add to their work environment and make us that much better off in our soil and water conservation efforts. Thank you very much and appreciate your coming online and also here in person. Thank you.
All right, if you have any questions, whether you're online or in person, feel free to ask.
I have a question.
Sure.
A comment. I understood too that willows are also good for erosion control, not just the water take up.
Yes, yes, they
if
are.
You have a bank or something that does kind of wash away. All right.
Yeah, so for people online, the question was, are willows great for erosion control too? And the answer is yes, because they have extensive root systems and they can grow clonally, which means they can send out suckers and new plants from the same root system. So they're really great at kind of reining in an embankment in a short period of time. So they're excellent for that.
So where can we get information about getting certified to plant?
The question was, where can we get information on how to get certified to plant?
That would be the what's called the non-point source training center at the DEP in Maine, and John McLaughlin is one of the trainers there. And there is in that web, if you use this link, it shows the different workshops that there are. The major first workshop that you would attend would be an 8-hour workshop, which covers all of the erosion types of issues and techniques and history and pictures and whatnot, and will give you a provisional certification, which you then augment with documentation of a work that you actually do under another certified person. You have to submit pictures and what you've done to then be fully certified. And then there's educational afterwards, what we call CEHs. I think they're continuing education hours that you need to do every year. You have to add 1 or 2 hours in order to keep your license going. So that's where you want to get in touch with, and it's within the main DEP website.
We've got a question if folks can get this presentation in a PDF format, and the answer is yes. If you email me, my email is on there at the resources page right now. It's garden@mclaughlingarden.org. You can also find that information on the McLaughlin website. I'd be happy to send you a copy of this presentation.
We got an awesome info. Thanks so much. Oh, another one. Awesome. Thank you.
I have one announcement to make. John McLean has created new educational prospective seminars to be available through the Non-Point Source Training Center. There's one in April 24th, I believe it is, at Bridgeton. And that covers exactly what we're doing in a 4-hour format, where it's not just the old style riprap and box culverts. It's the transition to planting plants and doing appropriate sequestration of water with plant and rain gardens and whatnot, and learning about what needs to be done where and how to permit it and how to actually procure the materials needed to do that. So that's, I think it's $60 for a fee for that. And that will lead you further into your education if you already have a certification. I'm not sure if that's applicable for people who just want to learn, but call Emlyn Emmerich there at the main lakes in Bridgeton if you have any questions. Thank you.
I have a question. My property is covered in 75, 80-year-old pine trees.
Mm-hmm.
So what can I plant that the pine needles aren't just going to kill?
Yeah, so some of those low-growing plants we were talking about, like the bearberry and blueberry, are good choices. Does the area, what does the sun look like? Is it kind of shady?
Well, it's all shady because it's all those big pine trees.
Okay. Yes. Yep. So Arctostaphylos could be a good choice. Also,
You changed it.
Pachysandra is also an excellent choice for shady and very dry areas. Yes. I can definitely talk to you a little bit about what would
Definitely.
work
I would
best.
like to get some names.
Yeah, certainly.
All right, well, your
I
resume is
remember
up
all
here. So. Sorry.
Nope.
She messed up there.
Marcia, that's a touch screen.
Oh.
It's my computer.
No, we don't need that anymore.
Okay. And
Sorry.
let's see. You're good. And are there any more questions? All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate you coming. If you want to see this presentation again, it'll be posted on our YouTube page, McLaughlin Garden, which can be found on our website or just by searching on YouTube. So thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you.